So I think of like Get Out, Jordan Peele, right? Again, horror movie. I've seen maybe 3 or 4 horror movies in my life. I think more of like slasher type movies, right? Not for me, not for me. I'm a wimp, whatever. Get Out was, again, if you're talking genre, I mean, what an unbelievable movie,
Oh, yeah, I love
right?
him.
Right. And so he talked a lot about, it's not maybe the stereotypical horror movie that people think about, but he's talking about, basically like what's more scary, what's more traumatic than racism,
Right,
right?
right.
So I guess I just kind of wonder about, like, using horror in White Horse that has so many themes that we'll talk about, again, intergenerational traumas and racism and misogyny, and so many, but it's under the horror label. Like, I guess I wonder how much of the book, you talk so much about structure and plot and just moving the story forward, and the plot is so intriguing and interesting. How much of you see like the book is like an allegory, and how much of it is like that's maybe like secondary?
I think a good book, and that's what we all try to write, right, is both. I have to say, I primarily watch quickly horror films, and my boyfriend hates them, even though he's a thriller writer. And he's like, "What are you watching?" I'm like, "A good show." And he's like, "No." And he's like, "I can't sleep," but they help me to sleep because they're the only thing that distracts me enough.
Sure.
What I find fascinating about horror is that when does it spill over to crime? Because like slashers are what
Right.
people think of, but if the slasher has absolutely no supernatural qualities, maybe it is crime. And so
Mm.
I think about that a lot. And it's Sina Palayo, who's a indigenous Puerto Rican American writer who writes these novels that I think are right on that line, and I find them so fascinating. She's a fabulous
Mm.
person, a fabulous writer, and but yeah, I love The Ring, I love The Conjuring, because The Ring is certainly an art house film. The Conjuring is just brilliant in execution in terms of
Mm.
what it does. I think that what good books do, and certainly what good horror books do and good literary books do, is they're doing something on the surface, right? They're moving you along in terms of what's actually happening, the plot. um, and then underneath it all of these things that are happening have an impact. There's this underneath emotional reason rising up.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I think for me, I actually like the idea of a sort of dark magical portal to another world. There is something,
Mm.
always, I'm a dork and I will always be compelled by that stuff. However, yeah, I think it's clear that the main character, she's very happy to be indigenous. That's not her problem. It's not a journey of like
Right.
learning who she, learning to love herself as an indigenous person, but it is a journey, for this like cynical, tough, self-educated person to be like, ugh, spirituality, ugh, not into it, and but it is a journey for her to realize like, maybe my mom was not who I thought. Maybe there is a way to do spirituality in such a way that might not be cheesy and might speak to who I am. And
Mm.
so I think that's kind of what's going on underneath. And as the mother's ghost is literally haunting her, um, and I try not to dissipate that at the end. I try not to make it like, oh, she was actually just having an episode. No, I want
Sure.
it to be, it was an actual ghost because that's more fun. But I do think the mom, who we are, regardless of where we're coming from, and certainly if we're coming from intergenerational trauma, it matters and it impacts our daily lives. And I think we
Mm.
all have to recognize that at a certain point that we're haunted by our ancestors.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of like, if I think of like some of the scariest scenes I've ever seen, and I'm not a huge movie guy, I don't watch a lot for whatever reason, but I mean, I do. I think of like the ET scene,
Oh
maybe
yeah.
with the right with all the doctors or the FBI agents or whatever the heck they were,
I
right?
cried. I just
Right.
cried. I
Oh
cried as
my
a kid,
God.
and yet made my parents, take me to see it again.
Yeah, exactly. See, that's the difference, right? And like Candyman. I saw Candyman. I was probably way too young. Besides, I remember at the end, one of like I think the girlfriend or something. I thought she was like the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. I was 13 or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I remember, I never again, But like as I got older, like there are themes there.
Yeah.
There's behind the scenes. It's not just straightforward. I'm interested if you've seen this movie. I had a friend who was such a big fan of Shaun of the Dead,
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
and she tried to pitch it to me as if it was, there's so many themes, and I'm just like, it's just a zombie movie. But again, I think I went with a closed mind, right? Sometimes I just kind of think like maybe those type of things are just too on the nose.
I think sometimes what happens is, if your tastes are generally speaking realism or literary,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of want those themes to be kind of hammered at you. And I think in some ways this is part of what I admire about good horror or good sci-fi or good fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
is that it's so persuasive what's going on. The
Right.
action is so interesting and fun that you can, if you want, ignore what's happening underneath, and you can, if you want,
Mm-hmm.
not see the themes that are being
Sure.
shot forward in such a subtle way. And so I just like that dance. I admire that dance,
Mm-hmm. To make it clear, I'm the one. I was not right. Obviously, way more people saying the Shaun of the Dead or whatever is a classic, or those others. Like I'm in the minority, and there's a reason I'm wrong. um, I love if you don't mind, maybe like what was your pitch for the book? Like, how would you kind of describe it? I don't want I don't you don't have to give a 30-minute summary, but how would you pitch the book? How did you pitch the book?
Essentially, the short log line, right, is indigenous literary horror, but the longer one is, it's about Carrie, who's an urban native, and she loves heavy metal, and she loves Stephen King, or she loves heavy metal, she loves horror, the film, and the books, and specifically, obviously, Stephen King and Dave Mustaine.
Hmm.
But she despises her mother because she believes she's abandoned her when she was 2 days old, until, right, her super sweet, well-intentioned white cousin Debbie finds this bracelet of her mother's that is ancient, and the main character touches it, and the mother starts haunting her. And then, right, there's this, evil Bigfoot, in a way, monster creature who's invading her dreams. And then she decides, well, I have to figure what happened to my mother after all. So,
Hmm.
yep.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I was just gonna say. I forgot what I was gonna say. I appreciate that. The I don't know if I call it an epigraph or like the intro, like thank you or like dedication is basically like thanking those who came, or like, hey, this is for those who came back to horror, my
Right.
fellow nerds, right?
Right.
That was so cool. I always tell my students, nerd is a compliment. I hope I'm a
Oh,
nerd,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, it wasn't cool when I was growing up, right? Like, it was like nerd, and I was, yeah, I'm a nerd. But then now it's like, oh, I'm a nerd. It's so cool. And I'm like, wow, that's new.
Unrelated real quick, but that's what I was going to say. When you wrote about the bracelet in the book, it's described as turn of the century. I'm not going to lie. I was like, oh, 2000? I'm like, oh, no. I was like, oh man, shoot. I'm getting
It's
old.
actually
1990. Okay.
based off of my family's bracelet right
Uh-huh.
here. It's
Look at
you can't even
this.
see it. So this has, it's like copper, which a lot of native jewelry was. I think it might be turn of the century. I think it's more like 20s or 30s. It was in my family. My mom gave it to me. My grandmother had it.
Oh
I
my
think she got
gosh.
it from hers. There's a lot of plains iconography on it because that was what was most popular at the time, regardless of
Mm.
your tribal background. And so I kind of tried to make it a little fancier in the book.
Oh wow, thank you. That's so cool to get to see the inspiration right there. Oh man.
Mhm.
Was there a lot of research you had to do?
Yeah, I did do some research. Some of it was, what I know about my own background. But yeah, I did a lot of research on The Shining because
Mm.
everyone has their pet theories about it, and I have mine. But I wanted to know. I actually went to
Mm.
um, the Overlook. I went to the Stanley Hotel, and I'd gone there as a young person with my niece, who's actually here. You want
All
to wave?
right.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Hello.
my niece.
Hello.
Or Maeve. I always make her do it. So so yeah, we went there, and it was hilarious because we took the tour, and the tour was hilarious and awesome. And the guy who ran it
Sleep
was
tight.
yes, I will never forget that. I pictured him, because he would be like this, sleep tight, and he had this, very distinct accent. But he in the middle of the night, so we had gotten the room is in the book. And as much as I love, all of this stuff, I'm so fascinated by the paranormal, and I'm like always,
Mm.
listening to recordings or seeing if I can find, oh, it sounds real, but I'm like, no, it's not. But we were told that a something like a white guy who stands in the corners and glares at you is in that room, and then he might scratch you if he doesn't like you. And so we bought him a
Mm.
spirit plate, and every time we talked to him and said, "Thank you for letting us stay in our room," the light would flicker. And it got to me because in the middle of the night, my niece at the time was 14, and I was like, "Maeve, could you turn on the light? Because I have to use the bathroom." Like I couldn't do it. I made her do it. So
Oh man,
yeah,
that was a long 5 foot walk or whatever, 10 foot walk,
it
huh?
really was,
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, but it was great. So I did a lot of research about King, about The Shining. I went to the hotel. Yeah, lots of different research.
I'm so interested in the plot because there are so many, not gotcha moments, but so many like whoa, and and plot twists. Did you like? I mean, did you work backwards? Are you someone who's like all visual? You have like a what they call it, like a storyboard. I just wonder about how you made everything like connect in the end, make it cohere.
I think a lot of literary writers are like, structure doesn't matter, and I'm just going to write forward. And I really believed them when I was younger, and
Mm,
I shouldn't have. I have a really messy head, and I love language, and I love idea, and I love complex characterization. And it was a bad idea, and I had always valued story. I value structure, and I value story.
mm,
So when I got together with my partner, he being a thriller writer was like, well, you should probably start with these more nuts and bolts books, because I'd been like, well, here are all these fancy books. And he was right. And Save the Cat, I know people make fun of it, but if you have a really disorganized head, it's great for you. And so
mm,
the beat sheet chapter, I think, for people who have like done MFAs or just done a lot of literary realism reading and talking and conversing, and that's who your peers are, it's actually a really great chapter because it sort of lines it up. It doesn't mean you have to conform to it totally. But again, the second thing that I started reading at the tail end and that really helped was Jane Cleland, because I had never been given this idea of like red herring, like twist.
mm.
And I like those things. Those are actually very hard to master. And so I wanted to know how to do that. And so I have a beat sheet. I have things that are my twists. I have things that are my red herrings. And they're fun and they're hard. They're hard to master. So I don't sometimes understand why literary people
Mm.
pshaw them so much, because they're hard. They're hard for me anyway.
You got me thinking about who the red herrings would be. Okay, or who or what? Okay, I have. All right, I got a couple of theories. All right,
Because have you reached the end? So you don't know yet?
I'm done.
Oh, you do know.
Oh,
Okay.
I
Well, I
finished.
shouldn't say then. I shouldn't say anyway because it's on the podcast. But
Right, but I'm just thinking about like, well, I'm thinking about like the police, the retired. Okay, all right. Let me. It's gonna take me too long to get through my thoughts. All right.
yeah.
So you talked about, the thought was that Carrie James, the narrator, had that her mom had left it when Carrie was 2 days old, excuse me, right? And because of that, she hated her mom growing up. Because of that, her dad apparently supposedly, became a drunk or dove into alcohol. He got into an accident, a car accident. He
Right.
basically, right, had severe brain damage and really needed full-time care. From then on, there's the Debbie's the cousin who I think you referenced, who was like another sister. Her husband that's in that first chapter. Have you ever been to an apartment, by the way, that had a miniature golf set up?
No, it
That was
was
cool.
based off of, I had a friend growing up, and her father had bought an abandoned complex next door. And for some reason, my head did that.
It was cool. So, I think the book even starts off with that chapter where it's like you see you see again Debbie's the cousin, and she and her husband, is it Jay?
Gosh, now I'm forgetting.
Yeah. Oh geez.
Jake. I want to say
Jake.
it's Jake. Yeah.
Jake. Okay. Okay. So, she and Jake are fighting. They're she's fighting for her independence, and Carrie definitely does not like him, and there's some major blowups as the book goes on. And then there's like the specter, and it's, if you can say a specter is literal, it's a literal and figurative specter of Jamie,
Yeah.
right? Who was Carrie's best friend, who died maybe like what, 16 or 17, a little older than that.
Yeah, it had to be something like that. I can't
Yeah.
remember. I'm bad. My agent's really good at helping me math. I forgot
Yeah.
what the math was. But yeah, yep.
Well, yeah, just that there's obviously there's guilt, there's trauma. Her friend died of a drug overdose. Carrie had a lot of those times, hanging out with guys and drinking, underage and those kind of things. And it was obviously tragic and horrific that Jamie died. And there's that guilt and that specter that's with her at all times. Talking about guilt, I mean, that's obviously a major theme.
Yeah.
There's the micro themes of, within like one person. There's more just about, I guess, like intergenerational traumas, right? In like a bigger, almost societal way, but obviously through the family. Misogyny for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, I think so. The book does start in the White Horse, which is actually a bar, an Indian bar in Denver that was bought recently, some at some
Ah,
point in the end production of the novel, and probably it's been an Indian bar for possibly 50 years longer.
oh wow.
And it's sad because I know they're going to bulldoze over it almost certainly, and it makes me
Oh.
really sad. But yeah, it's the Denver Indian Institution. I know it's a bar, but like that is why I said it there. That is why it's titled that.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so, but as to guilt, yeah, and these other themes, I think that Carrie's a pretty confident personality,
Mm-hmm.
but she has to kind of come to grips with, ooh, I've been kind of letting my cousin be my husband and my best friend and my
Mm-hmm.
everything. And I need to, cut her a break. And even if I don't like her husband, me just, banging on her about it isn't going to help. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wanted to show that the men in the book, I don't want to be like, and really, they all redeem themselves, yay, it's all good. But I wanted to show like a multidimensional process, like the main character's cousin's husband, she finally hardlines him, and right, he's given a chance and a choice. And I think that's, to me, that's a viable route out. Like everything's realistic in there in the sense of the
Mm-hmm.
way in which men can function sometimes.
Mm.
The main character, there's obviously, I don't want to reveal too much, but I also wanted to show how sometimes men will avoid accountability, why, where they're coming from, especially as Native men. And, again, what is a route out? What is an authentic route out? So
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I mean, there are being young and being with men, I mean, they're probably not as on guard as they should be because they're young, but they're bad men. Obviously the major plot line or the major thing that happens at the end, or thing we find out at the end, obviously is very much very tragic to say the least. I wonder just about, without saying, I don't want to talk about that last part because I don't want to spoil that part. But just I wonder about the idea of like, and it's a trite cliche. I even heard, darn, I think Kanye West using it recently, but like the idea of like hurt people hurt people.
yeah, yeah,
Carrie almost literally like puts like, okay, I'm not going to think about that. I'm not going to think about my mother and that, and either by drinking, smoking, going out with guys, or just literally just, I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to watch TV. I'm going to get more positive things like music and that's the thing. But I just wonder about like hurt people. Is that, and just like the idea of like the
yeah.
traumas and cycles. And like, I'm not asking you, I'm not asking you to tell me in a sense how we stop them, but I just wonder what that book has to say about that.
I think natives are great. We all do, it's a human thing, but natives are, this is a big deal because like, again, like the whole identity, who's really native or not, I try not to wade into because it's so destructive,
Hmm.
but I can see just the constant, I call Twitter the shame machine, or I call it like the wasteland, because
Yeah.
I can just see them just, killing each other over this.
Uh,
And I'm like, for what? Like, because I think the problem is like there was a time in which the idea was, white folks are in control. They need to appoint who is the most authentic Indian
hmm.
to talk to them and tell them all the things and be the one. And I'm like, that is a destructive space to be in. And I don't understand why natives have forgotten that. Like
Hmm.
I like it now where you have again Brandon Hobson, Kelly Jo Ford, David Heskawambi Wyden, Stephen Graham Jones. They're all succeeding all at once. And there needs to be a real acknowledgement of, again, like this is technically my background as well, Black natives, Latinx natives, urban natives. And yes, I do want to see more natives like Morgan, who come from reservations, writing as well. But we can all do this at once. And the value that I was raised with, even though obviously my family's problematic in its own way, is raise all together, raise everyone
Hmm.
up together. And so I do think I've seen these dynamics in my own family and other Native families, this legacy of shame, genocide, colonization, boarding schools, day schools, the way the government does or does not categorize you. In the United States, right, we have a situation where if you're on the reservation, the government's tracking you incessantly. If you're off, unless you're visibly Black, they're told just put down white. Canada,
Mm.
you have a different situation where it's, they track them, urban Indians, with the exception of some Black natives, from what I understand, incessantly as well. But then it just becomes like, well, whose ancestor is too distant? And then Mexico, it's like so many people are indigenous, but the government, I feel like their record keeping is not that wonderful, and it's also like people self-identified, in order to help themselves. And so like, oh, I'm just Spanish. And so I think like there's a huge, there are big, ugly things that happened, and they're complicated, and all these different countries are kind of crashing together in various ways. And I think sometimes when people facetiously try to apply a standard from one country to the other, right? Or just straight up ignore how complicated it is in order to gain an audience. And I think that, I think the only way to diminish that hurt people thing in our communities is to have better, honest conversations where people are acknowledging how complicated and interwoven these communities are. So
I don't remember the exact line to paraphrase the blurb from Stephen Graham Jones for this book. It was something like, it's a book about natives without ostensibly being about natives. That sound about right?
Yeah, Steven's he's really good at those. Poor Steven, he's like approached for so many blurbs. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
But he really liked it. It was really cute. He actually emailed me, and he's such a wonderfully, I love him because he's such a wonderfully nerdy guy too. And
great
he's
glasses
like,
too, right?
Oh yeah, he's like, well, he's very like, he's one of those native guys that like there should be a wind machine on him at all times. But then when you like meet him, he's like, I like comic books. He's so nerdy. And I just love that about Steven. He's such an unassuming, kind guy. And his wife is cool. He's just a cool guy.
That's
so cool. Yeah. But yeah, he was so funny. He emailed me. He's like, yeah, didn't even realize who was. It was, wow, really good job, but yeah, I said something about native without trying, because I do
without trying. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think that it's regardless of what your demographic is, if you care about the bigger issues and you're trying to weave them organically in your book, there are going to be moments where people are going to say things that are a touch more overt. But I think that for me, if I'm going to really just write about an idea or a concept, I want to take that to an article that I'm going to write. And so I don't, I want all of my characters to seem like real people, who are in real circumstances, even though it's completely fiction.
So. It's not a binary, it's not a polar opposites, but like, this sort of theme of like the rational versus the visceral, the spirit world. Again, they're not, direct opposites or in opposition, but I don't know. I guess kind of seeing Aunt Squeaker, which is a great name and great character, as kind of like representative of like the old, I mean, she's older, literally older, right?
Yeah.
But also more like of the spirit world. And Carrie, especially at the beginning, and she has a lot of experiences that change her, but she's not into that at all, right?
No, she loves Auntie Squeaker. And Auntie Squeaker is from her, Apache indigenous side. And, she's kind of like what people call a curandera or a spiritual person or whatever. But she, I think Carrie it's probably a sore spot when it comes to her mother. And it's also just, again, she's a pragmatic person. It's just not her thing. She doesn't want to go to church. She doesn't want to go to Native American church. She doesn't want to. So.
Right. So she's someone who as she's experiencing some of these spiritual things, she's telling herself, no, but it's, she can't resist. They are real.
Yeah.
Right. And it's such a great character, Auntie Squeaker. She's got like a crew too, right? Whenever she shows up at a place, it's like she rolls like 20 deep or something, it seems like. I wonder about like place as a character, like the bar, that you do a good job with you do a great job with like, like the dive bar, so to speak, versus like the gentrified, like, yuppie type of bars, Idaho Springs and the suburbs. And I just wonder about how much, like place helped ground you for this book.
Yeah, Idaho Springs is it's not even a suburb. Like I'm in a suburb.
Oh, right.
But it's like a town, like way, but yes, in many ways, I wanted Carrie, even though she has a GED, I wanted to honor that she is self-educated and she knows stuff. She knows stuff
Mm,
about horror. She knows stuff about heavy metal, and she knows stuff about old Denver. She is
mm,
knowledgeable in that way. And in some other ways too, I just wanted it to be an homage to old Denver because old Denver is kind of dying, like, Lakeside
mm.
Amusement Park, which I did go actually for
Yeah.
research.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, but I'd been there so many times as a kid, and it was a wonderfully spooky place. The White Horse, which is, just so unique, and I'm sad it's gone. There are lots of places like that in Denver. Casa Bonita, which
Mm.
has actually now been bought by the South Park guys.
Oh
So
yeah.
we'll see what
Okay.
happens. I hope they keep it real. I hope they keep it like it was. So yeah.
Casa Bonita. I feel like I've read about that. Maybe with I don't know this I don't know if you know Gustavo Arellano. He kind of literally wrote the book on Mexican food in America.
Oh, funny.
And I think he definitely shouted out in his book. But yeah,
Oh
definitely the
God.
way you described it in the book and the way you described it now, yeah.
It is
Yeah.
possibly historically, and any Denver native will tell you this, the worst quote unquote Mexican food you can ever have. Like maybe New York in the 80s had worse Mexican, but otherwise, no, it would be
Oh
Casa
man.
Bonita. And apparently the South Park guys are going to change that, which that I'm actually
Uh
fine with that change. That's a good
sure.
change. So
Okay. Oh shit, I think I'm treading into dangerous waters here. This is Denver and Colorado. This is green chili or red chili?
well, what's weird is they do both, but their green chili is like a stew. So if you go to
Okay.
New Mexico and you ask for green chili, you'll get actual green chilies. Whereas here, you're like, I like
Uh
green chili. Because my boyfriend and I used to argue about it because I spent a lot of time in New Mexico. And it's like a stew. It's like,
okay.
I don't explain. Like they put it
Yeah.
on your food. It's totally different here. So
So I mean, so White Horse again is such a great book. It's I mean, you bring in the history. There's some of the visions she has. I mean, it goes back to Geronimo. There's of course like the medicine bag, the Navajo War Club. Um,
Apache.
pardon me, the Apache War Club, and Russell Means, and there's a lot about the American Indian movement, AIM of the '70s and such. Which Cecilia, Carrie's mother, was involved in, right? So,
Mhm.
I mean, like you said, if somebody wanted to, wade through certain books that are like, oh, this is a mystery, well, there's going to be a great plot. Maybe if you're not in them, this book has everything, puts it all together. Carrie is a very sympathetic character, even when she's not being nice necessarily, right?
Yeah.
You're definitely drawn to her. So many interesting characters. Not even talking about like, Carrie's grandparents, the police, the retired detective, the history, the psychological thriller part of it, right? Like I think of going back to Get Out, I think of like that scene where she's teaching him how like not to smoke anymore, right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
God, that was so
Right. Scary, right? Scary. I think of like Leonardo DiCaprio and like was it Django when he's talking about like Samuel L. Jackson. He's talking about like the former slave, just like scary in movies are not scary. In
yeah,
this
yeah.
book, there are parts where it's not scary, it's not slasher, but the psychological part of it and getting into Carrie's head and how universal is guilt, how universal is trauma. So it's very singularly your book, singularly about your part of the world, et cetera, and it's universal. So huge congratulations. I'm not the only one saying it, of course. Tell us about publisher, where to buy it, maybe if it's some local bookstores. Give your social contacts, your social media info, and all that.
Yeah, I'm basically ErikaTWurth and at on everything on the TikTok.
The
On
TikTok too.
Oh yeah, and you'll see me awkwardly try to do like I had to hire a former
uh,
student to teach me how to do TikTok because I'm 90, and but she was good at it. Ashanti, I'm so shout out to Ashanti.
All right.
And I am on Twitter and Instagram. But yeah, trying to think. So yeah, Flatiron, which is an imprint of Macmillan, just knocks it out of the park. They care
Mm,
about YA and commercial and fantasy and horror, and I think a lot of their books have a literary edge, right?
mm,
So it was a really good fit for them. And not only that, but their team is amazing. Zach Wagman and Maxine Charles are my editors. They're great. Um, Amelia and Christopher are my publicity, and Catherine Tro is my social media person and swag person. They
mm.
did these cool retro keychains for me. They're just great. They're like a really cool, supportive imprint. I love them, and the book has a lot of things going for it. early on, a sort of top secret thing happened. I guess you can see it now, but I was told by my people not to talk about it. So I don't know. So one big thing happened, like a book clubby type thing, and then it started to put that machinery forward. And then I think people just kind of liked it, right? It's just not kind of a weird book in certain ways, right? It's crimey, it's horror-y, and that sounded wrong, horror-ish. um, this is sort of tough urban Indian who she's funny and she's mean, but she's lovable, like you say. And it just seemed to have some movement. And then a couple other, like I got on all these lists, which is amazing. I'm so appreciative to people. And then it might even be on the TV, so that might be in
the TV.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. We'll see if it doesn't end up on the cutting room floor. So
oh my gosh, yeah, I mean, so November 1st it comes out.
That's right.
Officially that's next. We're recording on a Saturday. That's not this Tuesday but the next. How you feeling?
Terrified, really. Excited. All the small presses that I published with, look, they were great. They're wonderful people, but they will tell you we have a certain budget, and so it's nice to have, it's nice to be with an imprint that really can put their weight behind it, and they have. Right. And they've also just loved it and been just as kind and wonderful as my small press experiences. So, but it's also really super nerve-wracking. Yeah, and I'm working on a new one too. So
I was just going to ask you about that. You can say as little or as much as you like about the next project.
It's called Room 904, and I don't know. It's not official yet, but Flatiron is acquiring it. And yeah, it's about, it's more new Denver. This main character is kind of femmy in a way that Carrie's kind of masculine or tough. And she's kind of a millennial and she likes brunches. But her thing is she's a paranormal investigator. She was finishing her PhD in psychology when her sister suicided, and it sort of turned on her powers. And now she can speak to the dead, see the dead, and even, tap into their memories. And so she and her best friend and sort of platonic life partner, who's a queer man with HIV, do this. That's what they do. They live together and they're best friends and platonic partners, and they're paranormal investigators together. And then her big thing is the Warrens. She's obsessed with the Warrens from the Conjuring series, and she sees them as like her sort of like predecessors. And then at one point, though, the Brown Palace calls her in and says, we need you to investigate. These people are being murdered. They check in this one room. They show up in room 904. They suicide every two women every 9 years. And she doesn't want to do it because this is where her sister suicided. This is where sister was obsessed with this cult. And then, but she sees her sister's haunting and she still doesn't want to do it. But then her mother checks in and she's like, well, my mother has 3 weeks to live, so I better do something.
Whoa, this is a fully realized, fully developed, or pretty dang close to, it sounds like.
Beat sheets.
Wow, you create some memorable characters, that's for sure. I love that idea of like the platonic roommates.
Yes.
Right? Platonic.
Especially as a female writer, I'm always like, there is another way,
Very interesting. It's been a pleasure to speak to you today. So cool to get in the lab to see the inspirational bracelet, and to talk some of the themes and some bigger themes. And again, I can tell you're a professor. And just heck of a book, and I'm so excited for people to get it. And it would make a great movie or mini series, but obviously it would stand alone by itself. So congratulations on the great accomplishment, and I hope you can enjoy all the fanfare that comes in these next weeks and months.
Oh, thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. It really was an honor.
The honor was mine. Thank you so much. What a pleasure it's been to speak to Erika T. Wurth. Continue good luck with her writing. I'm so looking forward to continuing to follow her career and her important work. Thanks for listening to episode 149 with Erika T. Wurth. You can now subscribe to this podcast on Apple. Please leave a 5-star review. You can also ask for it by name using Alexa. Find it on Stitcher, Spotify, and on Amazon Music. Although we don't like to give a lot of money to that Jeff Bezos guy. Follow me on Instagram, where I'm at Chills at Will Podcast, or on Twitter, where I'm at Chills at Will PO1. You can watch this and other episodes on YouTube. Watch and subscribe to the Chills at Will Podcast channel. This is a passion project of mine, a DIY operation, and I'd love for your help in promoting what I'm convinced is a unique and spirited look at an often ignored art form. As of yesterday, October 21st, we're now official on Patreon. Please look for the Chills at Will podcast on Patreon. Sign up, you see all the benefits you have there. There are 3 different tiers. The intro song for the podcast is Wind Down Instrumental, and the other song played on the episode was Hoops by Matt Whitehour, and both songs are used through archesaudio.com. Please tune in for episode 150 with Elizabeth Williamson, a feature writer at the New York Times and a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Her work has appeared in the Atlantic, Rolling Stone, and Slate. Sandy Hook, An American Tragedy and the Battle for the Truth, was published in 2022, and this episode will air on November 1st. For now, thanks again for listening. I hope that these quarantine days bring you texts by writers with mad skills like Erika T. Wurth, whose work, like Whitehorse, gives you chills at